Hey, I'm Mike Myers, and this is the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, which is geared to support songwriters and producers to gain confidence and turn pro. I bring on industry experts to help you improve and monetize your skills, engage better in the writing process, and build healthy habits to create a sustainable career that you love. Caffeinated, inspirational, conversational. What's up, friends? Mike Myers here with the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, episode number 84, Nick Wheeler. Nick is the guitarist of the All-American Rejects, and I know what you're thinking. I know the All-American Rejects. Of course you do. They've had a string of successful singles, Move Along, Swing, Swing, Dirty Little Secret, What Gives You Hell. They've worked with tremendously successful producers. Producers I geek out over, like Eric Valentine, Greg Wells, Howard Benson. We're going to get into Nick's process, some stories from the road, but also to talk about his new studio that he's built here in Nashville. What is it like to spend time thinking about, okay, this is my opportunity from the ground up to build a studio? What's that process like? So we're going to talk about all of that in this episode and probably a little bit more. So here we go, episode number 84, Nick Wheeler. There's so much I want to dive into because, you know, everyone knows the history of your band, or should, in terms of, like, you know, I guarantee you they've heard your singles. And what's interesting I find about, like, the All-American Rejects, and also, you know, we get into your work, I feel like you guys have had a very good run, where a lot of bands have, like, a very short span, but you've had a pretty significant run.
Well, I'm a single adult with no kids, and I've been touring for half of my life. So it's just, we were just really busy, and we worked really hard from 2000 to about 2012. And I think in doing so, like, we really invested in, you know, our future as a band, and we've been able to, you know, even though we haven't put out a full-length album in, 11 years, we've been able to sustain, a career and, being able to go out and tour and, trickle out a single here or there. But yeah, just keep doing it. So we've been really fortunate. It also, the 2000s, like we struck right at the right time. Like we were doing rock music when guitars and shit were on the radio. So that really helped too. So we're really lucky, and we worked really hard. So I do think it's a combination of those two things.
And you worked with some really awesome producers. I mean, Howard Benson, Eric Valentine, who I love. I binge on his YouTube channel a lot when he's just breaking down songs, which you guys were on. You were breaking down one of his, which I think was,
I saw that he was doing that, and I reached out to him, and I was like, dude, can I come over? So next time, Mike and I are the kind of recording nerds / historians in the band. So I was like, next time we're in town, can Mike and I come over and geek out with you on one of our songs? And, thankfully he said yes, and that was so fun. I love that shit.
Because it's like, I geek out about the analyzation of, like, okay, what is that? And just the deep dive of, like, what exactly is going on there. There's a lot more, which leads to the question, was recording. You said, geeking out. Has that always just been the thing that, like, music and recording, they go together. Sometimes people see them as separate things, or later on they understand, I should get into this.
Right.
And there are those that have always been, like, hovering over the console and watching people and asking questions.
Well, first, I was a kid. I wanted to just be in a band, and in middle school, when playing guitar was cool and, like, girls started to notice and stuff, like, everybody fucking played guitar. So if I wanted to be in a band, I couldn't just be another guitar player. So I learned drums. I was in percussion in school bands, so that helped that transition there. Played bass in a couple bands. So I just, whatever I could do to get in a band. Like, I just had 3 bands going at all times. And then growing up in a small town in Oklahoma with no all-age venues, the only venues you could play were bars. And if you were going to play in those bars, they were like college bars, so you had to play covers, a lot of country shit. So if we wanted to get our music out there, we had to record it, because there was nowhere to play it outside of our bedrooms and our garages. We were too young to, like, put on house shows or anything like that. That wasn't really even a thing in my town. So I picked up a Tascam 4-track recorder and just started recording my bands, or just recording myself doing anything but singing. It's a lot of instrumental tracks. But yeah, I just started recording the bands I was in. I recorded a couple other local bands eventually. And then once my band took off, I was just kind of the guy that recorded all the demos, and I loved it. That's the part, if I look back on my 30 plus years doing music, like that's my favorite part of the process, is like just creating something from the ground up and being in the studio and trying shit. And you don't have that anxiety of a live performance where if something goes wrong, like you're fucked. I like the idea of like, okay, there's a problem. Let's fix it. Like, I love that.
It's a lot of discovery too, because it's like, this is where you can chase sounds, and this is where it's like, well, what if we layered this with this? Oh,
no, you're right.
Weird.
It's all about discovery. And I feel like even though I've been doing it and I've been around it in some, really awesome scenarios for so long, I still feel like there's an endless well of shit I need to learn.
Yeah.
And there's always something you can learn, even if it's just learning somebody else's process. It's like, oh, that's really cool. The way you do that, that would be really helpful and make my workflow way more efficient. So I'm going to steal that. And then, like with anything else, like your method just becomes this amalgamation, whatever that word is, of all these experiences and inspirations and your own trial and error. And it just becomes you.
I think those are the people that end up doing recording well, is because they know it's a constant learning process. They're geeking out over watching other people do it. And they're like, well, what did you do right there? I feel like half the time before I moved to Nashville was just watching people going to studios and being like, hey, I'm not going to ask any questions. I just want to watch you do, which was a total fucking lie. I would ask questions like 10 seconds and be like, why'd you do that? And just like lean in and be like, that's really cool. Like, it's just, but to actually understand, you have to watch people and their process. And then you're like, an amalgamation, like, of everybody's process is essentially you, because you took little bits and pieces.
Totally.
And that's your thing now.
Right. Absolutely. And then, like I said, mix that with just trying shit on your own in the studio and just coming across stuff that like you're like, that's fucking cool. I'm doing that every single time from now on. Yeah, I'd love that discovery, and then just getting to implement that stuff and try stuff out. I don't know. I've always kind of been a nerd about learning. I wasn't in school. I hated school.
I hated school.
It was the worst. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was the subject matter. I don't know if it was the idea of getting tested on it or graded on it. I don't know. But ever since I dropped out of college, I have been learning constantly, which sounds ironic and like an oxymoron, but I'm doing it on my own. It's like, what is Ryan say on The Office? He's like, lead me, but only when I'm in the mood to be led.
Well, I think it's because in school, it's basically, what makes it uninteresting is because it's yes or no, right or wrong. In self-discovery of like what the recording, and it's not necessarily what's right or wrong. It's like, that's right, but is it the right? I don't know if it is. Yeah, and it's just like, well, it's wrong, but it's not really wrong in these scenarios. And that's what I think is like what makes it interesting, that dives in. Like, I probably have read more books now in the past 3 or 4 years than I have ever in school that I didn't care. Right. But now it's applying to the things that I know. If I know this little bit, it might fucking move me a little bit closer to it moves the needle forward, I guess, a little bit in the direction.
Unfortunately, though, when you read so many books as an adult, you don't get a free personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut anymore.
You don't get that. And no. I don't get the dark. What
was that? Was that the Book It program?
Yeah, it was
the
Book It. You get like 5 during the summer, and it's like, great, there you go. And I'm like, oh, sweet.
Nope. You get a $4 pizza.
No,
Sweet.
It's just, and I had to pay for the books too, and then they came here, and I don't get any. I have to order a pizza maybe, and that's what I'll do. But I think maybe that's what makes it, why school is not interesting, because it's a lot of yes, no, right, wrong, where the process of discovery and like recording and songwriting, it's like, yeah, that might be the answer. It might not, but that's okay.
You're totally right. I think for me, I think it was literally just the idea of going somewhere I was supposed to be learning the material and then being tested on it. Because even in college, I literally just took only music classes. You weren't supposed to do that unless you were a music major, and you couldn't be a music major without being in the marching band that played at football games, which I had no interest in doing. I was like, fuck it. I don't, basic classes, whatever. I'm just going to take music classes. I'm probably not going to finish college anyway, so let's just do what I can. I hated the classes, so I was living at home with my parents. I would just be like, all right, cool, go into class, you guys, bye. And then I would go to the coffee shop and I would read my textbooks. I would learn, but I would do it on my own time in my own environment. And ever since then, like, needless to say, that was my first and last year of college. But ever since then, I've just been like really into learning, but on my own time. I even tried going back to school during COVID. I did Berkeley online, which did help fill in some gaps because I've been self-taught in recording. And just, I've been in, like you said, I've been around great producers and great engineers, and I've learned a lot from watching. But I was like, there's probably some shit, like some like actual theory that I should learn. And I learned some of that. But again, it was kind of a school environment, and there were assignments. I was just like, ugh. Like...
It's just something when it's just like, now you must do this. It's like, it's just like, but if they were like, hey, if we finish this song, we can move on. It's like, contextually, that feels better than just like, and here's the test of like, how many hertz does it get to the, and it's like, okay.
And don't get me wrong. I love memorizing shit, like what pitch, like each like frequency measurement is, learning where middle C and all that shit is on a frequency spectrum. But I'm a nerd for that shit. But also, like, what I'm kind of spoiled because now I get to come into the studio every day and just work on whatever I want to work on. Yeah. Yes, I might be in the middle of a project that has deadlines, but there's so much that goes into that. It's like, am I gonna edit and tune vocals today, or am I gonna just fucking play guitar and do a bunch of overdubs? Like, I can do whatever I want. So. Kind of spoiled.
That isn't an option on a test where it's just like tune vocals.
Just answer the ones you want.
Fucking overdubs. Fucking overdubs is going to be this. But it's interesting that you mentioned that because I only went to college for a year. And I did the same thing I lived with home and I was like, hey, I'm going to class today. Totally didn't. I went, got a bagel, got coffee. I would listen to music. I would write some stuff. I would hang. And then, but... Maybe,
don't get me wrong. I did that too.
Yeah.
I wasn't a total dweeb, but I did also learn some shit on my own.
But I think that's awesome that it led to that. Now, eventually, where did you when it comes to building your own studio? That's a whole other thing because you can have a setup, you can have like a room. Like right now is like, this is a studio, which is supposed to be a bedroom, but like, with soundproof.
Sure.
Yeah. But at what point did it was like, okay, I'm going to start building a studio and I'm going to like really get this going?
I mean, so I built a freestanding studio. It's in my backyard. It's not a commercial studio. I do rent it out to friends. It's got isolation and it's a great drum room. Yeah. So nowadays with everybody making records in their bedrooms or in, a spare room or whatever, not everybody has the means to record like live drums. So I will rent it out to friends to do that occasionally. I've got some buddies coming in next week to track some drums. So setup for that's going on right now. But I think it's when you build a studio or set up a space, I think it's all about your needs and your workflow. Yeah. For me, like I said, I've been recording since back in the Tascam 4-track days, and that was literally my childhood bedroom is where I did that. And then every house I lived in after that, probably 10, 12 different places, there was some sort of studio setup, whether that was my Dell computer.
Dude,
with
you got
Cakewalk.
a Dell. You got a Dell.
I got a Dell. My first computer that I bought myself was a Dell in like 1998, and I got Cakewalk. That was my DAW after the Tascam.
Yeah.
And then, that eventually went to figuring out how to work on a Mac because like Macs were new and cool and everybody was using them. And Pro Tools would only work on Mac back in 2004 whenever I got Pro Tools for the first time. But it was back in the days where Pro Tools not only would only work on Mac, it would only work on Mac OS 9. So the laptops that were out were like, it was like the first generation MacBook Pro, which shipped with OS X. And so I had to partition the hard drive and boot up to OS 9 anytime I wanted to work, and then shut down and boot up to OS X whenever I wanted to like check my email. So yeah, back in those days. But anyway, all that to say, I'm full of those like back in my day anecdotes. I'm realizing that's where I'm at in my life.
But
plus,
me,
I'm around so many young artists and young our crew guys on the road are 10, 15 years younger, and so like I'm really turning into the back in my day guy.
It's weird when people are like, I was born in 2003, 2000, and it's like,
yeah. Not only do they not remember 9/11, they weren't even fucking alive yet.
They had
it's
no
insanity. So that was kind of dark, but you know what I mean?
That's okay. But it is. It's a historical moment that you imagine everyone was there. No, I wasn't born, but my parents told me about it.
Dude, soon people are going to be alive that don't remember COVID. It's going to be insane.
Yeah.
But anyway, all that to say, what are we talking about? Studios.
Yeah.
All that to say, everywhere I lived, I had some sort of studio set up. And they got a little, embellished and bloated throughout the years, but it was always a spare bedroom or something like that. In my last house here in Nashville, there was a great space. It was one of those, you know how all the houses here have like a top room that they just call like a bonus room?
Yeah.
Like nobody knows what they're for.
And you're just like, okay, cool. And it's got a window there.
And sometimes
the ceilings,
it's literally, it would in most houses, I feel like it would be the attic. They just happen to drywall it in and call it a bonus room. So it was that. And there was kind of like this little side area where I could set up a drum kit.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's usually where I would record drums or vocals. It was nice, but it still didn't have enough isolation to where I could track something without headphones.
Oh, okay.
Every space I've ever been in has been a headphone space. Mm-hmm. So if we're tracking drums, I'm wearing headphones. If we're tracking vocals, everybody's wearing fucking headphones. Which is fine.
Yeah.
But I just got to the point where I was like, I feel like the stuff that I'm working on, the stuff that I want to be working on, and the workflow that I'm working towards requires something a little more traditional as far as a studio setup goes. I like a large control room with a couch where everybody can hang and we can write, or there can be a band hanging out watching drum tracking or a vocal tracking session, and everybody can hear what's going on and people can like chime in with ideas, and it's much more collaborative than only the people who are playing and hitting buttons get to hear what's happening, So I love that. I love there's more collaboration as far as that goes. I love the idea of actually getting to set up a live band and then I'm in another room not having to wear earplugs or headphones, and you can kind of get a sense of a song that way. Or I can be in the live room with them. There's just more space and more possibilities and more options because every band and every artist is different. A lot of bands never play a song until after it's recorded, and then they learn their parts. But some bands still like jam and write in a bedroom or a rehearsal space or a garage, and you're like, cool, we'll set up and play me the song, and we'll, then we'll fuck it up and go from there. Oh, and also there's a bathroom in here. That's the other thing. People can use the bathroom. They don't have to go into my house. And I got tired of people coming into my house to work. What if I don't want to clean the fucking kitchen? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want people seeing how I live. I am very OCD and it's very clean, but I don't want, just like school, I don't want to have to clean it because you're coming over.
It is. It's kind of like when you have guests over. It's like, oh shit, they're coming over. Okay, let's just get this. You don't have to be always. The house doesn't have to be on call and like always like exactly like this.
Right. That's my space, man. Stay out of my space. You can come swim in my pool, but you can't go in my house to use the bathroom. Don't use the bathroom in the pool either. But I do have a bathroom.
The separation between house and space. I think like it's just like. Also too, like you can leave. Like your workflow and actually go in your house and be like, cool, that's one space. Mm-hmm. And then this is like, cool, this is me getting ready to record.
Right. And I think a lot of people will relate to that, especially because of working from home over COVID. It's like you have to designate a part of your house to work in if you have the means for that.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it's probably their kitchen island or their dining table or whatever. But like even though I love what I do, there was always a place in my house where I would work. And if that was upstairs, I would just get that feeling when I was maybe I'm going upstairs to do something else.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel like I'm going to work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now, I'm in a position to where there's a place outside of my house that I work. Granted, my commute is only about 40 feet.
Yeah.
But it's something. Just that like...
It's just that separation.
30-second walk back to the house to decompress and reset and be like, okay, I'm going to like do something normal.
And I think what's great about the space that you built, it's again attuned to what you need. And that's over a series of time. You've had different series, you've had different setups, different things. And now it's like, okay, what would be my space? What would be like the perfect space for me and what I need? And it doesn't have all, other things that like, fuck, why do I need? I don't need that. I just need this space, this amount. This would be ideal for people are writing, people are setting up, and that's it. You don't have to rent out anything.
Yeah, I mean, and even after the fact, after it's built, I'm realizing like, oh, I didn't need an ISO booth. I never use a fucking ISO booth. I like making the type of music where a vocalist can be in a big vibey room. Yeah. And you don't need that super tight pop or hip hop kind of vocal, because I don't work on that kind of stuff. Now it's just kind of the ISO booth is storage. I throw some amps in there. I throw some mic stands in there. I could have added that to my live space. Like that's where the piano could have gone or something. But yeah, for the most part, I do find myself, there's a reason that studios are built the way they are and the way that the flow is because it's tried and true and it works great. And there's a lot of that in here. But you're right. The way I wired everything, just the way the gear is laid out in the control room, like ergonomically, like is all to my specifications and my preferences.
Which I think is awesome. Now, like for you, if you're working with someone, what is your flow and your process of like, from pre-production? And it can vary.
It does vary, yeah. I learned a lot from the experiences I got to have with Eric Valentine, Greg Wells, Howard Benson, Tim O'Hare. All of them were different. Yeah. And there are things that I really enjoyed about all of their processes, and there are things that I would never want to do again for most of those processes too. And so I can tell that, I mean, I think it does help having been an artist and, still an artist, deep down, but I like to cater to the artist as much as possible, I guess. How do you want to approach this? When it comes down to specifics, like, are we going to track drums first or are we going to do that last? That's really just based on budget and time. It's like, I would love to sit here and figure out everybody's part and do drums first, and build it from the ground up. But that's really, nobody has that kind of time or budget anymore. So usually you're working off a demo or you're just kind of throwing in some, programmed drums that everybody's going to track to. And then at the end of the day, bring the drummer in, knock those out. Because you're going to quantize the shit out of them anyway. Everybody does. So if you want to be competitive, you're probably going to do that. As far as like overdubbing and the flow and like what we do, I always look to the artist. I'm like, what sounds fun? What do you want to do next? Like, you're tired of playing fucking guitar for the last 2 days? Cool. Let's get somebody else in here. You know what I mean? And also, I've learned when we made Move Along with Howard, we did the drums first. We were very well rehearsed when we went in. There was a big pre-production process, which again, I love that process, but not all bands have the ability or the means to have pre-production. With Howard, it was like a week. With Eric, it was like 2 weeks. There was pre-production. We were rehearsed. We did drums. We knocked them out in 2 days. And then for the next month and a half, it was guitars, bass, vocals, and our drummer was bored out of his fucking skull. So I try to keep everybody engaged. If it's a solo artist, obviously, like me and that artist are constantly working the entire time. But if it's a band, it's like all right, let's sprinkle in some vocals so the singer, gets some action, but then they also get some proper vocal rest, and you're not saving all of the vocals for the
We're going to do it all right now.
And again, sometimes that's how it has to be. Sometimes the vocalist or the drummer or somebody like only has a certain number of days, and that's where actually I think the term like producer comes in, because you're like, okay, how much money do I have to work with? How much time do I have to work with? What is my dream? Like, what is my dream scenario? How much do I want to get done? And then how do I do that within these parameters? And I think that is where the producer part and that word comes into play. I think the rest of the time, it's more just like being like a director and a collaborator.
You're a good people reader. It's like you have to pick up the vibe of like, what are they feeling? Oh, they're not feeling it. Or it's just like, I can tell the drummer's feeling a little like, okay, let's engage and like bring them back into...
There's a lot of psychology. My favorite thing ever is, yes, well, I know this from being in a band, you know, 4 people who are very different people who have very different personalities. You learn to read each other and play off each other, and you know when to approach or when to lay back. And I've learned from that training that, all artists are the same. All bands are the same. There are like 4 or 5 different personality types, and everybody in every band inhabits one of those. Like, so you do kind of learn how to communicate, say to a drummer or a bass player, like, you're like, what if you have a part in your mind? You're like, I know exactly what this fucking needs to be. How do I get them to come up with it themselves? That's my favorite puzzle.
That is such a good puzzle, because it's like, you want them to stumble across the idea, be like, well, what if I do this? That's great. That's exactly what it needs. But getting them to that point and that
but
space.
I will say, and I've been guilty of that before. I have done that successfully a few times, and it's always like, oh my God, I can't believe I pulled that shit off. But I will say, if I have a drum fill or a fucking guitar riff or something in mind, just something like that, and I'm like, I really want this person to do that, rather than just like pick up their instrument. Like, can you just do this? Oh, fuck it. I'll just do it. It's like, what if you did something like this or with this kind of vibe, and you're a little vague about it, then they might stumble upon what you're thinking about, or they might come up with their own version of that.
Yeah.
And that's what makes their band and their art unique. When you're working with the band, like I work with a lot of solo artists where I am the band and I have to play everything, which is great and it can be a lot of fun, but if I only did that, everything would fucking sound the same. So I feel like when I'm working with the band, it's like that's an opportunity to actually inject other instincts and other playing styles into stuff that I'm working on. So if I'm like, something like whatever, and they're like, okay, cool. Or I could kind of do that, but with this extra little bing, whatever.
And you're like, that's it.
And it's like, oh my God, I love that. That's you. And that's kind of what I wanted to hear. Like, it's the best of both worlds.
I feel like cultivating the ground for them to also get permission to be creative, but also you're giving them just a little bit of a guideline. Like, you're almost like guardrails. Totally. Like, hey, you've got some room to move around here, but like, can we just keep it like still on this track?
Right. Turn off the wah pedal and do it again. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the phase, but maybe if we just like turn that off for a second. Metal Zone is a really cool pedal, but what if we just take that off?
I don't think every guitar needs chorus and doubled. Then it's just kind of like, yeah.
Hey, it's Mike, and I just wanted to jump in the middle of this podcast to ask you this question. Have you ever struggled to get a great demo? Have you even outsourced this and, went to other people, you spent a lot of money, and you get it back, and you're like, I don't think this is worth it. Listen, at this day and age, you need to be doing your own demos. There's so much technology at your hands, and you've probably searched at YouTube looking for examples, but you went down this rabbit hole, and you're even more confused. what I want you to do is go to songwritingforguitar.com and look at our free training series, DAW 101 with Madeline Finn. Now, Madeline is one of our coaches, an extremely amazing songwriter. She's racked up over 24 million, million streams on Spotify. She's had multiple placements, plus she was a top 70 contestant in American Idol, so she knows a thing or two when it comes to music, and she has a great series breaking down the process so you can start doing your own demos from home. This is kind of your go-to where you don't need anything else. So go to songwritingforguitar.com, scroll down to our free training series, and click DAW 101. All right, so let's jump back into the episode. Do you tend to geek out on like different combinations of pedals and like combinations of amps and just like, what is your, one of your like secrets of like, I love this combo. And I always get like this particular sound.
If I'm playing guitar on a project, I need an AC30.
Yep.
I would say a Plexi, but I've been playing this orange Rocker 30 for a while, and it's fucking great. I love it.
Yeah.
But probably a Plexi. An AC30 and a Plexi, and something quirky, like a JC120, or I'm loving my my little tweed champ right now.
Okay.
Like, that thing's fucking cool. I'm like, all I need is this and this and this and this and this. No, really, like... I love my Firebird because it can be big and chunky for rhythm shit, but it's got those mini humbuckers, so it can also kind of sound like a Telly if you need it to.
Kind of cut through the middle sometimes.
Yeah, honestly, give me a Firebird, a fucking AC30, and some kind of boost pedal, whether it's a Tube Screamer or a fucking Red Snapper is another one of my go-tos. The ZVEX shit's great. Super Hard On is one of my favorites. Honestly, yeah. A guitar, a pedal, and an AC30, and I'm good. And if I'm playing on a project, there's probably a tone in that track that has that combination. Yeah. But yeah, I do love geeking out, and I'm like, it doesn't always work out. Sometimes I'm like, feel like this needs to be weird, so I'll break out, my fucking giant, RS modulator pedal and patch in my Space Echo and then be like, this is either going to be amazing or this is the worst idea I've had today. But yeah, I love just trying stuff out and bringing in the toys. And that's another thing that I feel like artists don't have the opportunity to do as much anymore because everything is so in the box. So when they come in here and it's like, I'm going to go get some toys, and I come back with a fucking armload of pedals.
Yeah.
And then we run synths through them, or, anything tactile that the artist can also participate in, is just a lot of fun and just kind of adds to their experience.
Yeah. But I think it has to be, because I forget the statistic. What is it? Every day, 70,000 songs uploaded to Spotify, something around there. It's like 60 or 70. So It's just like, you can either, be exactly like something, or there has to be something that cuts through that's just like, what the hell was that? That was weird.
Right.
A good weird, where it's just like, kind of what you said, either like, this is either going to be fucking amazing, or it's like, this is the worst disaster I've created today, but let's find out and see what happens.
Totally. No, and you're totally right. I mean, everybody has the same fucking plugins. When I hear Decapitator on toms or something, I'm like, I know exactly what that is. That's why I'm really falling in love with the ability to use more analog shit. Anything proprietary that leads to either a trademark sound of mine or of the artist's. I even went as far as like researching on how I could build a reverb chamber in the attic here. Shit. I don't think I have the time or the means for that, or the money. God knows how much that would cost, but that would be fucking awesome to have my own like reverb sound. I remember Eric Valentine had a chamber. When we worked with Greg Wells, we got to work in the Village Studio D. It had its own chamber. And if you're ever, lucky enough to work in a studio that has like EMT plates, like fuck. But that's like proprietary, especially a chamber, because like that's a space. That's not just like a piece of gear that anyone can own or a plugin that anyone can own. I love that proprietary shit. And then I think that also, if the song is good, the material has to be fucking good. If it's good, then you geek out as much as you want. if it's not good, there you have some like homework to do. But yeah, if the material's good and you can do something unique with the sound, I think there's a better chance that you'll cut through the noise. I mean, like you said, there's so much fucking noise, and there's no gatekeeper anymore.
No, there isn't.
I don't even know how you judge success.
But I think cutting through the noise, I think this is refreshing to hear the process of what you're talking about, of like, just try it. Like, there's that experimentation is where you actually stumble on the good shit. Yeah, it may be something you're like, God, that's the worst combo to ever use. Or you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm going to file that away. And I'm going to remember that. And people are going to think I'm crazy when I mention this next time. But then I'm going to show them, they're going to be like, shit, this is amazing.
Right. And I think, and everybody does this. Any writing session I'm in, somebody's like, we should do something like not this, but something like it. Everybody has the disclaimer, and I think that's part of the process. It's kind of your insurance policy. I think it's like, I have a really terrible idea, you guys. Check this out. And then if it's amazing, you're like you kind of look like a mad scientist, like in the best way. And then you can be like, you have that to draw on next time. Next time you're looking for something wacky in that way, you're like, I did this thing this one time. Check this out. And then you can come at it with more confidence. But yeah, it's like, I'm finally getting around to reading that Rick Rubin book, like the rest of the world. I feel like I'm the last person to crack it open, but
I haven't read it yet. So
it's good. It's really good. Yeah. But his whole thing is like just going about everything and going about creativity, especially creating art with like this like childlike wonder, like with no judgment or preconceived opinions. Just like, let's try it, see what happens. And I think that's really cool. I think that's what you have to do. And you, sure, protect yourself and say like, guys, this idea might be fucking terrible, but let's try it.
But I think this goes back to, if I can connect school, the problem with school is like,
callback.
I know. It's just like this or this. So there's a right and the wrong.
Right.
But like with creativity, it's just like, it might be right. It might be wrong. I don't know. But it's like, it might be wrong for this, but it actually might be right for the. It's not a clear yes-no distinction. And I think those that maybe do well in that sort of yes-no world, it's hard to take those chances that are out of the box, that are very weird. And yet, for people that are like, I don't really like yes-no, but I do love really experimentation and like odd combos, because that's where you get the best combos.
I remember vividly a conversation I had when we were making our record with Howard. There is a section of a song that goes C, A, E. Doesn't matter the type of chord. It was just C, A, E. There was a little synth loop that he put in that went C, A, and then it looped back to C when we all went to E. And I was like, that can't go to C. We're playing a E minor chord. Like that's terrible. Like you're not supposed to be able to do that. And he just goes, so what? Who cares? Sounds fine. And I listened to it and I was like, oddly, it does sound fine. This shouldn't work, but that's fine. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. We don't need to tune one of those notes. That's fine.
Ooh,
so I do think, while it's important to have those rules and that theory, especially from a brain like mine, I like having that foundation. But also it's important to be like, you know what shouldn't work, but we should try.
We should try.
Yeah. Let's turn the high end all the way up on the snare. Why not? Just random. If you have an idea, like I said, just try it. It might suck, but it might be rad.
But I think that's refreshing to hear, because I think people are so conscious about, offering ideas, opinions, thoughts, because they're like, what if it's wrong?
Right.
Or that's why they, don't finish songs sometimes, because they're still rewriting the first part and rewriting the first part and rewriting the first part. And meanwhile, it's like, well, what's the chorus? Oh, I haven't gotten there yet. I'm still rewriting the verse. And it's like, well, shit. It's just like, well, stop it. It's just like that over analytical and critical brain, because they're looking at everything and they're like, it's got to be fucking perfect.
Right. And it is tough. And our band is guilty of that. Like everything we write or release, we feel has to be great or better than what we did before. And that makes writing and creating tough. It's a lot of pressure to put on yourself when, in the end of the day, it's going to be a body of work. And it's a lot of times to get to something great, you have to put out a few stinkers. So I think doing the process is, it's like that whole 10,000 hours thing. Like you can't just focus on the one idea until it's great. It's like, let's focus on a lot of ideas. And then at the end of the day, when there's that one really good one, like we'll really focus on that. But we didn't get to that without talking about all this other stuff that may or may not go anywhere. You know what I mean?
I think again, that's people need to hear that because they just don't. Yeah,
and a lot of time it is self-editing too.
Yeah.
A lot of time there will be maybe a song idea that Tyson had or a part that I had that when we bring it to one another, we're really excited about it and we think it's great, but we both went through a lot of self-editing to get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's also part of the process of what I'm saying. It's just like, don't be afraid to just like work on crap for a little bit until you find the thing that you're excited about.
Which I think people don't. They think it needs to be this glorious, like, this is my... And it's like, no, it can be a song.
Yeah.
And literally, that's it. It's like, the whole purpose of that song was to exist to get a better song.
Yep. People here in Nashville write 300 songs a year with the hopes that somebody will hear 2 of them.
And I think that's why people are like, oh. Yeah. But it is. It's just like, it's just treating like, hey, that was a song. But you know what? You could probably write another song. It's like you could go back and re-edit that song, that first one that you did years ago, or you can just write a new one because that's basically what you're going to be doing. You're going to deconstruct the hell out of that first one.
Right. And sometimes, if the idea is meant to be, it'll find a home eventually. But yeah, another thing that I really subscribed to that was really hard to get around to for a long time, I think I was always waiting for something to come to me, like shower thoughts or something. Like, ooh, that's a cool melody, or oh, that's a cool idea for that. And yeah, sometimes it does help to like step away from something and like sleep on it or whatever. But for the most part, it's like I like coming in here every day and working on something. It makes me feel like I have purpose. I feel fulfilled. I'm excited. At the end of the day, I'm like, you know what? I don't know if that's any good, but I feel really good that I did it and that I pushed past that. Maybe that just like a little bit of dread or a little bit of hesitancy coming in here. I'm glad I pushed past that and I was creative today, and that felt really good. So that's another thing that I've come to subscribe to later in life than I wish I would have, but has been really, really rewarding.
What you're describing is kind of what Angela Duckworth in the book Grit talks about.
I don't know what that is.
It's a great book about those that are consistent in their craft or like do well in their craft. They are the ones that are just consistently showing up that continuous daily, little bits, they're learning, they're applying, little bits, applying. And the ones that are quote unquote, that they say like, oh, it's based on, it's easy to say they were talented. They end up actually plateauing. They don't really do that much because like they kind of just, they were never curious. They were just like, it came supernaturally,
that's
and
a good
then
word for it.
And they just kind of plateau. It's like the ones that do well I'm not picking on school, but like, the valedictorian that's like does well, and then you go back to your hometown and you're like, what are they doing? And then you're like, oh, they're just doing an office. What happened? Because they got it was very easy, but then when things started to be like, well, you may have to do this alternative route, it doesn't really work out because they're it's fighting against what they know. The ones with grit it may not work out, but they're intrigued why it doesn't work out.
Right.
And then they lean into it, and then they go, well, let's just do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And that's where they refine the process.
Refine the process, totally. You said something there that I think is the key, is just always be curious. And like I was saying, I'm always wanting to learn, so I guess that's curious. I like that a lot. What was the book again? So
it's called Grit. It's by Angela Duckworth.
Okay.
She had.
What am I saying? I never read. It took me a fucking year to get around to this Rick Rubin book.
Dude, so. You got to do Blinkist. Blinkist is essentially a little app that does a synopsis of books. So what it is, it's
so like Cliff's Notes for the
yeah,
iPhone?
and just like so you could just be like, yeah, it's like you can do 15 minutes of one book and that's it. So it's like if you got like a 45-minute commute or you're driving somewhere, you could listen to the same book 3 times in a row and kind of really soak it in. And it gives you the highlights or the takeaways.
Do kids even know what Cliff's Notes are anymore?
I don't think it is because they just ask ChatGPT. They're just like, tell me the synopsis.
Wow.
They're like, just tell me what it is. But I remember I loved Cliff Notes. That was great. That was my go-to. It's just like, I don't really care about this Shakespearean thing. What is it? Okay, cool. So that's what happens. That's awesome.
I do love audiobooks though. And there's a few that I feel like are better to listen to. Like I'd listen to the Dave Grohl book on a road trip. That one's fun to listen to because it's him telling the stories.
Just talking the story. Yeah.
Rather than reading it. But I mean, what? Okay, I didn't read it. I only listened to it. So I'm assuming that was the right thing to do for that one.
I think it is. I think however you choose to consume a book or a story, that doesn't, fine. It may be audible. It may be reading. It may be actually, there's books I bought that I never bothered reading. And then one day I was like, I'm really curious about this now. It was like I bought that book for like years later.
Yeah, my house is full of them. Maybe one of these days I'll get around to reading them.
Well, then next episode we'll just do top books and top coffee spots.
I feel like I'll talk about coffee spots all day long. But I feel like with reading were we just like, was that beat into our brains that we had to actually physically do the act of reading as kids and in school, because like we had to like learn how to read and like learn how to do it at a normal pace or whatever, or like is reading a book and listening to a book the same? If, like you said, however you consume the information is fine, so long as you're getting the information that you're after.
I think we were drilled with it because they didn't foresee the span of how that
there would be another way to consume. Well, there are always books on tape. Remember that? You could check them out at the library.
But then I think for kids, they're like, then we have to get the students tape recorder. It's just like, we're not paying for tape record for kids.
Yeah, now
it's
everybody
just
has
like,
fucking
too
iPads
much.
in school.
So now it's just like they thought it was just, this is the right way to consume information.
Right.
And if you're not doing it this way, there's something wrong.
You're rotting your brain.
But I think now there's just so many different ways to do it that
Totally.
I don't think that there's a wrong way. It's just, the more that you can connect it to what you want to do, where I got into reading was, it relates to what I'm interested in. Cool, you got me. I'm ready.
Right.
But I just, if you can't bridge that gap for me, I can understand why half the books in high school and school I didn't read, or they were just like, it's not a good, not good at reading.
Yep.
It's like, I just didn't care about it.
Still never read Beowulf.
Oh, fucking Beowulf. I
got
don't
a fucking
even
A in that class.
I barely passed. I remember it was all Beowulf, and it was just like, what is this? How does this apply? How am I going to get a loan on my house? How is this going to apply to escrow? I don't get it. It's like, you can't bridge the gap.
Right.
I can't. But dude, this was so good because I think this is really refreshing for people that you can have a creative approach to recording, that you can try out of the box things, that you don't have to necessarily go with like one way or the highway, like it has to be exactly like this, that you have some leverage to do some out of the box things and be creative.
Totally. And I'm guilty every day of having to push myself to be like, so the basic way to do it. Now do it differently, or your own way, or just a fun way, something that inspires you. Like just with the like amount of work that's coming through here now, like I don't always have the time or the budget to do that on every project, but like I do try to learn something new and do something new on everything that I produce. Whether that's using a new piece of gear or just using an existing piece a different way, or, and I always try to learn a new keyboard shortcut, because those are fucking great. Gold. If each song or project that I work on, I can improve my workflow, learn something new, and do or use something new, I'm happy. That's my goal with every project.
Dude, I love this. This was so good. We'll We'll have to do more. We'll do a book review and then a cocktail review next time.
I've got like 10 that have been sitting on the table behind my couch for like, ever since I moved in. It just it just keeps getting taller too. I'm like, ooh, I might like that someday.
Ah, dude, this was so good. Thanks for being here, Nick.
Dude, thanks for having me. That was a blast.
And that does it for this week's episode. Listen, this is episode 84. If you've been enjoying our podcast, guess what? I'd love for you to go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Just click those 5 little stars and talk about your favorite episode. Believe me, every single review helps and starts to bring notoriety to the podcast so that we can start bringing even more amazing people. And guess what? We've had some pretty amazing guests. But you know what? We're always looking to do more. So Apple Podcasts, leave us an amazing review. And of course, this amazing episode was edited and produced by Chris Fafalius. I'm Mike Myers. Thanks for listening.